A girl and one of my so-called friends thought it would be hilarious to frame me as a creep just as a prank, they claimed. But when the school suspended me, and my parents threw me out of the house over their lies, they stayed quiet. Now, 15 years later, they'd had the audacity to contact me, begging for forgiveness and help. And, of course, they tried to pull the same old threats to drag me back into their mess. So I decided to destroy their lives, just like they ruined mine. I was only 17 when my whole world came crashing down. Even now, so many years later, it's hard to wrap my head around everything that happened without getting worked up. I'll do my best to tell this story clearly, though, because honestly, I need to figure out what to do about the situation now. Maybe putting it all into words will help me make sense of things. Back then, I was just your average high school kid. I wasn't the most popular guy around, but I wasn't some loner either. I had a solid group of 6 friends, at least, I thought they were my friends, and we'd all been close since middle school. On top of that, I was busting my ass to keep up my perfect 4.0 GPA. I had my sights set on a full-ride scholarship for college. My family didn't have much money, so that scholarship felt like my only shot at a better future. Then one day, everything started to unravel. I found a note tucked in my locker. It was handwritten, and it said it was from a girl named Beth, quiet, shy Beth, who was in my grade but barely on my radar. The note asked me to meet her in one of the empty classrooms after school because she had something important to tell me. I was caught off guard. I mean, we hardly ever talked. But I figured she might need help with homework or tutoring since people often came to me for that kind of thing. It didn't seem like a big deal, so I didn't give it much thought and showed up as asked. When I walked into the room, Beth was already there. She looked nervous, arms crossed, head down, avoiding eye contact. I barely got the chance to say hello before the door slammed open, and in came my so-called friends, barging in like they'd just uncovered the crime of the century. They started shouting at me, accusing me of God knows what. "What the hell are you doing, man?" one of them yelled. "I knew you were a creep," another chimed in. I was stunned, standing there like an idiot, trying to understand what was happening. I kept asking, "What are you talking about?" but none of them were interested in hearing me out. They piled on, throwing out accusations that I'd cornered Beth, harassed her, and God knows what else. And Beth? She just stood there, silent, staring at the floor like she wished she could disappear. She didn't say a word to defend me, not a single word. Her silence said enough, though. She didn't need to speak for everyone to assume I was guilty. The chaos drew the attention of a teacher, and things spiraled out of control from there. I was dragged to the principal's office while my friends talked over each other, spinning a story about how I'd been stalking Beth for weeks, making disgusting comments, and finally trapped her in that room. And Beth? She just nodded along whenever someone asked if it was true. She didn't have to do much else. Her timid act and refusal to look at me were enough to convict me in everyone's eyes. I tried to explain that the note was a setup, that I'd never done anything they accused me of. But no one cared. The principal handed down a suspension on the spot while they investigated. That was just the beginning. By the next day, rumors had spread like wildfire. Suddenly, I wasn't just a creep, I was a full-blown stalker. People were saying I'd harassed Beth for weeks, even touched her, and they claimed I'd been caught in the act. None of it was true, but the truth didn't matter by then. Then my parents got involved, and things hit rock bottom. The school called them in for a meeting with Beth's parents. I can't even describe how bad that meeting was. From the moment we walked into the principal's office, my dad unleashed on me. "What the hell were you thinking?" he shouted in front of everyone. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" My mom was crying, and when I tried to defend myself, she cut me off. "How can you lie right now?" she snapped, glaring at me like I was some kind of monster. Beth's dad was furious too, calling me a predator and saying I was lucky he wasn't pressing charges. The principal sat there with this disapproving look on his face, going on about how serious the accusations were. And Beth? She just sat there, quiet as ever, nodding slightly when someone asked her a direct question. That was all it took for everyone in the room to believe I was guilty. After the meeting, my dad told me I wasn't welcome at home anymore. He called me a disgrace and said I'd ruined my future and the family's reputation. My mom couldn't even look at me. And just like that, I was on my own. They packed a bag for me and left it by the front door. That was it. No goodbyes, no second chances, just me and a duffel bag. And just like that, I was out of their lives. I stood there on the porch, completely alone, not knowing what to do next. I tried reaching out to my so-called friends, hoping at least one of them would come clean or tell the truth. But they either ghosted me or doubled down on the lies, acting like they were innocent bystanders in the chaos they'd caused. The scholarship I had poured my heart and soul into? Gone. My teachers, my classmates, even the neighbors, all of them bought into the rumors. I couldn't even walk down the street without people whispering behind my back. Some would go out of their way to cross to the other side of the road, as if I was some kind of predator. And Beth? She never admitted it was all a setup. I don't know if it was guilt or fear that kept her silent, or maybe it was both, but her refusal to speak up cemented the accusations against me. The last time I saw her, she wouldn't even lift her eyes to meet mine. That hurt more than I expected. The next few years were a nightmare. I scraped by, taking whatever dead-end jobs I could find just to keep a roof over my head. Eventually, I became a truck driver, not because I wanted to, but because it let me stay far away from people. Even now, 15 years later, I'm still living with the fallout of what they did. I've never been able to trust anyone enough to start a relationship, and I'm on meds for anxiety and PTSD. I've done my best to move on, but no matter how far I've come, the scars haven't disappeared. About a month ago, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Alex. He was one of the ringleaders of the group that framed me. My first instinct was to block him and be done with it. But curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I clicked on his profile. The moment I did, 5 more friend requests rolled in, each one from the people who had destroyed my life. I didn't accept any of them, but I didn't block them either. I couldn't resist seeing what they were up to. And if I'm being honest, I wanted to know why the hell they were trying to reach out after all this time. Then the messages started coming in. Alex was the first to DM me. "Hey, man," he wrote. "I know this is out of the blue, but can we talk? I need to tell you something important." I ignored it. Next, Brian messaged me. "I've been feeling really guilty about what happened in high school. We owe you an apology. Please let me explain." That opened the floodgates. They created a group chat and added me to it, calling it Making Amends. Just reading that name made my blood boil. They flooded the chat with long, rambling messages about how they were young and stupid back then, how they never meant for things to go so far. One of them even had the nerve to say, "We didn't know it would ruin your life," as if that somehow made it okay. Then came the real gut punch. My parents reached out. My dad, who hadn't spoken to me in over a decade, sent me an email. "We didn't know, son," he wrote. "If we had known the truth, things would have been different." Different? The irony of those words made me laugh bitterly. Not long after, my mom left me a voicemail, crying and begging me to call her back. "I'm so sorry," she said. "We were wrong. Please, just talk to us." And then Beth. She sent me a single, haunting message. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I want to make things right." I stared at her message for hours, unsure whether to reply or just delete it. I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, or maybe even a twisted sense of vindication. I don't know how they tracked me down. My Facebook is locked down pretty tightly, but I guess it's not impossible. Maybe they found an old photo where I was tagged, or maybe they reached out to my family first and pieced everything together. However they managed it, they've been relentless. The group chat is still active, filling up my inbox with messages from people I swore I'd never hear from again. A big part of me wants to confront them, to demand answers, to ask why they're crawling out of the woodwork now after all these years. But another part of me just wants to block them all and keep living my life, far away from their mess. Update. I wasn't planning to post an update, but things have spiraled even more since I first shared my story. The comments and messages I've received from all of you have been incredible, and I can't thank you enough for the support. Sharing this was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but hearing from people who understand, even strangers, has been more comforting than I expected. Unfortunately, things with Beth and the others have only gotten worse. When they first reached out, their messages were all about making amends. They apologized, called themselves immature, and said they never meant for things to get so out of hand. It was infuriating to read. They didn't seem to grasp or care that their so-called prank completely destroyed my life. I ignored their apologies, hoping they'd get the hint and stop. But they didn't. The messages just kept coming. That's when their tone shifted, and everything became crystal clear. Their apologies, their attempts at making amends, it was all just a smokescreen. Turns out, their sudden interest in reconnecting wasn't out of guilt or regret. It was about Emily. From what they told me, Emily's husband had recently found out about the incident from high school, though he didn't know the full story. Apparently, one of Emily's friends let something slip during an argument or casual conversation, and it completely backfired on her. Her husband was livid. They claimed he'd threatened to leave her unless she could prove she wasn't the monster he was starting to think she was. Emily, of course, tried to smooth things over, brushing it off as some teenage misunderstanding. But he wasn't buying it, and she could feel his doubt creeping in. According to her friends, he'd even started digging into the situation himself, determined to uncover the truth. And that's when Emily started to panic. Instead of finally facing the consequences of her lies, Emily did what she's always done, she made it someone else's problem. She and her friends tracked me down, not to make amends, but to shut me up before her husband could uncover the real story. At first, they tried the guilt trip. "You don't understand how much she has to lose," they wrote, as if I owed her my silence. "We were just kids back then," they kept saying, like that somehow erased the damage they caused. They had the audacity to frame it as if we all shared equal blame for what happened, conveniently forgetting it was their lies that ruined my life, not some group mistake. When guilt didn't work, they shifted to threats. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to report you for harassing Emily," one of them warned. They said they could easily make people believe I was stalking her again. Another chimed in, casually pointing out that employers don't like being associated with people who cause trouble. That one hit me hard. They knew where I worked. It sent chills through me, realizing how much effort they'd put into tracking me down. They didn't just stumble across my Facebook profile. They must have dug deep, talked to my parents, maybe even reached out to other connections, piecing together enough information to threaten me all over again. And through all of this, Emily hasn't messaged me directly. Not once. But it's obvious she's the one pulling the strings. Her silence speaks volumes. She's hiding behind her friends, using them to do her dirty work because she knows she can't spin this story herself. It's pathetic, really. For 15 years, she's played the victim, building her perfect life on a foundation of lies. Now that it's crumbling beneath her, she's trying to drag me down with her. The worst part? It's dredged up emotions I thought I'd buried long ago. For years, I told myself I was over it. I convinced myself their lies couldn't hurt me anymore. But reading their messages brought all the pain and anger flooding back, like a wound I'd barely managed to stitch up being ripped open again. At the same time, I'm not that same powerless kid they broke all those years ago. I've fought too hard to rebuild my life, and I'm not about to let them tear it apart again. To everyone who's been following my story, thank you. Your comments and messages have been a lifeline, reminding me that I'm not alone and that I have every right to stand my ground. I'll keep you updated as I figure out my next steps. Right now, my focus is on protecting myself and staying calm. Update. When the threats started rolling in, it was like being 17 again. The messages quickly shifted from fake apologies to thinly veiled warnings. And now they don't even bother hiding the malice behind their words. They turned it around on me, accusing me of harassing Emily simply because I wasn't responding to their attempts to reconcile. They twisted the narrative, trying to make me look like the one escalating things. But the real gut punch came in one of their messages. "If you don't stop this, we'll have no choice but to report you for harassing Emily again." You wouldn't want your employer to hear about this, would you? That was it. That was the moment I hit my breaking point. These people had already destroyed my life once. I'd spent years clawing my way out of the hole they shoved me into, and now they were threatening to throw me back in. Not this time. I didn't reply to their group chat. Instead, I spent the entire night screenshotting every single message they'd sent me, every fake apology, every manipulative line, every veiled threat. I made sure to save everything, even the early messages where they were pretending to be remorseful. The next day, I went straight to my boss. I've always kept my head down and done my job as a truck driver for a small but solid company. Still, I was terrified they might believe the lies these people were trying to spread. I didn't want them to find out from anyone else, so I laid everything out. I sat down with my boss and told him everything about the incident in high school, how I was framed, and how these people had found me and were now trying to sabotage me all over again. I showed him the screenshots as proof. To my relief, he believed me. He's the kind of guy who values honesty, and I think he could see how much the situation was weighing on me. He assured me I had his trust and even offered to help. I asked for a transfer, something that would put some distance between me and these people. He didn't hesitate. "We'll take care of it," he said. "You focus on keeping yourself safe." But I wasn't done yet. If they thought they could bully me into silence, they were in for a rude awakening. I hired a private investigator. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I wanted everything: social media profiles, public records, family connections. If they were going to play dirty, I could play just as hard. The PI worked fast. Within a week, I had a detailed report on all of them, their spouses, families, even Emily's husband. Armed with this information, I put my plan into motion. I compiled all the screenshots into a single document, a comprehensive account of everything: what happened back in high school, how they had framed me, and how they were now threatening me to protect Emily's reputation. The first recipient? Emily's husband. I sent him the document along with a personal message explaining everything. I laid out how Emily had destroyed my life, how her lies had ruined me, and how she and her friends were now trying to manipulate and threaten me into silence. But I didn't stop there. I sent the same document to Emily's parents, her in-laws, and the families of her friends. If any of them had spouses or adult children, they got a copy too. I framed it carefully, not as revenge, but as the truth. I wanted them to know who they were dealing with and the kind of people they were living alongside. The fallout was immediate. The group chat went dead. Not a single message since. I'm guessing they were too busy dealing with the chaos I'd unleashed on their personal lives. From what I've heard, yes, I peeked at some of their public social media. Emily's husband was furious. My screenshots left no room for her to spin the story anymore, and the truth hit him hard. Her friends didn't fare much better. Some of their family members were horrified when they saw the threats and manipulation spelled out in black and white. After I sent the documents, I wiped my hands clean of it all. I deleted my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and moved to a new location with the transfer my boss had arranged. I made sure there wasn't a single trace of me left online, not even an old email address. Before I closed that chapter of my life for good, I sent one final letter to my parents. I poured out everything, all the anger, hurt, and betrayal I've carried for the past 15 years. I told them how they failed me when I needed them most, how they turned their backs on me when I had no one else. I told them they weren't just bad parents, they were the worst people I'd ever known. I didn't sugarcoat a thing. I told them they could cry and beg all they wanted, but it wouldn't erase the fact that they abandoned me. I made it clear that, in my eyes, they were just as responsible as Emily and her friends for the life I've had to endure. I ended the letter with one final message: I hope you live a miserable life, just like the one you left me to live. Then I blocked them, too. As for Emily and the others, I have no idea what they're up to now. Maybe they're too busy trying to salvage their own lives to come after me again. Maybe they've finally realized they've lost. Whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter anymore. For the first time in years, I feel free. My old account is probably still floating out there in limbo, but I figured I owed an update to anyone who might still wonder how things turned out. So here it is. I'm doing better than I ever thought I could. After I changed my location, phone number, and basically erased myself from their lives, I finally felt something I hadn't in years: peace. No more threats, no manipulations, no one trying to control me. Just silence. And it was exactly what I needed. Since then, I've been working on myself. It's slow progress, but it's progress. I'm still single, but I've started putting myself out there again. It's scary after everything I've been through, but I'm trying. I haven't started therapy yet, it's not in the budget right now, but I've been focusing on building a life I can be proud of. I'll admit, curiosity got the better of me a few times. I've checked in on their socials here and there, just enough to see how things have played out. And honestly? Karma delivered. Emily. Her life is in shambles. She's divorced, disowned by her family, and financially wrecked. From what I've pieced together, her husband kicked her out not long after I sent him the truth. She tried to spin the narrative, but the weight of the screenshots and the reality was too much for her to escape. Her social media is a mess now. It's filled with vague posts about being misunderstood and begging for sympathy from people who clearly don't care anymore. Her friends. 3 of them ended up divorced too. From what I've gathered, their ex-spouses learned about the lies and threats they'd been involved in, and it destroyed their marriages. One of them has kids who openly post about hating their dad. I won't lie, it felt satisfying to see that. 3 others have gone completely off the grid, at least online. But from what I've heard, they lost their jobs. I guess being manipulative and cruel eventually catches up to you. One surprise was Emily's husband. After everything came out, he tracked me down. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Having someone that wealthy and connected find you is unsettling. But when we met, he wasn't angry or defensive. He was sincere. He apologized for everything, even though none of it was directly his fault. He admitted he had no idea how deep Emily's lies went until I sent him the evidence. We ended up grabbing a drink, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel judged or interrogated. It was just 2 people acknowledging the mess we'd both been caught up in. I wouldn't say we're friends, but I respect him for facing the truth and trying to make things right once he knew it. As for my parents? I haven't spoken to them since I sent the letter. I meant every word I wrote, and I don't regret it. If they feel guilty or remorseful, that's on them. It doesn't erase what they did. They had their chance to stand by me, and they chose not to. I'm not giving them another one. If you're wondering how I feel now, it's simple: I'm happy. For the first time in over 16 years, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. I don't wake up every morning consumed by the past or paralyzed by dread about what might come next. That doesn't mean I'm completely healed. There's still a long way to go. Therapy would probably help, and I'll get there when I can. For now, I'm just taking things one day at a time. I have a steady job, my own place, and a sense of peace I haven't felt in years. That's enough for me. To anyone still following this, thank you. Sharing my story was terrifying, but it helped me more than I ever expected. And if you're going through something similar, just know this: you can take your life back, too. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Take care, everyone.